Hey friends, here's the thing. Family can be great. It can be awesome. But what we also know is it can be really, really hard. And conflict is naturally going to happen within a family, and specifically between parents and kids. One of the things I try to remind people often of is that conflict isn't a bad thing. Often it's necessary, but we still have to learn skills in terms of how to navigate that conflict well. And unfortunately, we're just not taught how to do that in very many places well. And so I just want to take a few moments and share with you some thoughts and reminders to help those of us who are parents better navigate conflict with our kids. First, a little bit about me. My wife Adrian and I, we've been married for 23 years. We have two sons who are 20 and almost 18. Adrian and I also both led children and student ministries for several years. We've walked with parents and kids on both sides of conflict that inevitably occurs from time to time. And we're definitely not experts by any means, but we've been intentional through the years, trying to observe and collect wisdom from lots of different people and lots of different sources and pay attention to our experiences as well. And so these next few moments is just me passing on what we've gathered to you. And we won't dive deeply into any of these for the sake of time, but hopefully they'll serve as some good reminders or maybe some new ideas to ponder. Here's the first one. If you have a kid who is making you miserable, remember that means that they're very likely miserable themselves. This is one of those anchor ideas that we constantly have to remind ourselves of as parents because it helps to place us in a position of compassion when dealing with conflict. If we have a kid who is angry and is acting like they're ticked off at the world all the time, it's important for us to remember that something is going on in them. They're likely scared, stressed, hurting, overwhelmed, embarrassed, ashamed, insecure, or something that is making them feel miserable. But many times out of desperation and survival, we just want our kids to stop acting so miserable and ticked off so that it will make our lives and our homes less stressful. We hate the tension it creates because it just gets exhausting on so many levels. But if we can remind ourselves from the start to begin from a place of compassion, what that leads us to, rather than just trying to get them to stop acting miserable by threat or punishment or avoidance, is to try to figure out how to listen, how to try to understand, how to create spaces that aren't full of condemnation, but rather more of a sense of, obviously something must be really bothering or upsetting you. What's going on? And then we can listen. And with kids especially, one of the things we have to try to do is to listen for the thing behind the thing. This is where something like a feelings wheel can be really helpful. So Google it if you don't know what that is. But the vast majority of people can only identify 3 emotions: happy, sad, and angry. But a feelings wheel can help you and your kid really start to identify what it is that's actually going on. And in turn, it helps you approach them with a lot more compassion. Here's a second idea. Validate what feels like a big deal in their world. One of the things that often escalates conflicts with our kids is just being dismissive of the stresses they're experiencing, whether at school or with friends or on some type of team or competition, where it feels like a huge deal to them. But we can have this attitude, whether we verbalize it or not, that kind of comes across like, that's such a small thing in the grand scheme of things. I mean, try having to worry about a mortgage payment or finding or keeping a job or paying bills or juggling this or that. And either in our words or just in our body language, we can invalidate what they're feeling by comparing it with our current stresses. But the thing is, they have no way of understanding the complexities of an adult world because they're not an adult. But when we validate the things that they feel like a big deal in their world, it makes them feel less alone and isolated in whatever they're dealing with. And you become a safer person to share with, because no one wants to share fears or hurts with someone who feels unsafe or someone who feels like they'll just dismiss whatever they say. Now, along similar lines, here's another thought, but it's a challenging one. Be courageous enough to ask your kid, is there anything I do that exhausts you? Now, no doubt it can be scary to ask that question, but if you want to get better at navigating conflict with your kid, give them the opportunity and make it safe for them to give you feedback. One of the things I've tried to tell my kids a lot as they've grown up is that they didn't come with a manual, that we're doing the best we can, but that we're going to screw things up. We're going to get it wrong. We just are. And so it can be really helpful to ask that question of your kids and to make sure to just take in whatever they say. And the thing is, you can't overreact in that moment. You can't get defensive. You can't make them feel bad for answering. Otherwise, you're just going to make it unsafe for them to ever be honest with you moving forward. But what it's also doing is it's modeling for them teachability and humility. You're not trying to pretend that you're always right. And so every now and then, just ask the question, is there anything I do that exhausts you? And be humble enough to listen and want to learn. Now, in that same spirit, here's another reminder. Be willing to sincerely apologize. Much of the time, the greatest amount of blame for any conflict with a kid is placed on the kid. Because they don't have much, if any, power in the relationship. They can't take your toys or video games away or ground you or make you go into timeout, although sometimes it feels like they do all those things. But as a result, much of the relational burden to apologize for a conflict is placed on the least relationally mature between a parent and a kid, and on the one who doesn't hold the most authority. But when someone in power, when someone in authority, and in this case a parent, chooses to take responsibility and sincerely apologize, specifically naming what they did, it's huge to relational healing and trust building. As a reminder, though, this isn't a loud, sarcastic, okay, you're right, fine, I'm sorry. Guess what? I'm not perfect. That's not an apology, and we all know it. It's this backhanded way of blaming. But when you have conflict, reflect on what you can own and what you can take responsibility for. Acknowledge that with humility and apologize. And again, what you're doing here is you're modeling for your kid the kind of behavior you want to see in them. And that goes way further than just demanding that they learn to apologize when they screw up. They see you model that on a regular basis. Now, another idea. When you do have to establish consequences for your kid, try to make sure the consequences accomplishes your actual goal. See, as our kids transition into later elementary age years and into middle school, this becomes especially important because our default reaction oftentimes is to, let's say your kid is disrespectful to you or to another parent or to a sibling. And we get angry, usually because we're scared, because we don't want our kid to grow up to be a disrespectful person, or because we're embarrassed because we think it's a poor reflection on us as a parent. What have we done so wrong to raise a kid that's going to act like this? And so we immediately try to establish a consequence. And so we say something like, okay, no screens for the rest of the day or the week. Give me your phone right now. But here's the thing. Many of you probably had that same thing happen to you when you were a kid or teenager, even though it probably wasn't likely a cell phone or an iPad or PS5 then. And what'd you probably do? You probably rolled your eyes. And if you reflect on it, did it actually make a difference for you? You'd probably say, no, really didn't really make a difference to me getting grounded or them taking away this or that. Because like in this case of a kid being disrespectful, taking away their phone or video games isn't necessarily helpful in helping them learn how to be more respectful and kind as they get older. And so when consequences are necessary, try to have the consequence help to accomplish your goal. Now the thing is, those types of consequences can take a lot more time to think through. It can involve taking a step back, taking some time and reflecting, getting creative, perhaps even asking trusted friends who aren't so caught up in the swirl of emotion to help give some guidance, but it's worth taking the time to do it. So perhaps in this example, your kid needs to take some time to write out 25 great qualities that they see in the person that they disrespected and give that to them. Or if they're older, they have to maybe take them out for dinner or dessert, pay for it themselves, and express 10 different character qualities that they're grateful for in the person that they disrespected, to look them in the eye and to share those things. Again, the goal here, whatever it is to try to have the consequence move you toward your actual goal. Now, speaking of kids as they get older, once they're in middle school and up, the majority of your time as a parent navigating conflict with them is much more beneficial when it's viewed as coaching versus disciplining. Doesn't mean that there's not a time for discipline as kids get older. But too often, we as parents don't make the transition to coaching through the majority of conflict. And so what happens is our kids start to feel like we're trying to control them. And the thing is, no one feels loved by someone when you feel like you're being controlled by them. But one of the things we've learned from someone years ago, and I think it's really helped was that as our kids became preteens and teenagers, was to see ourselves the majority of the time in a coaching role where we're coming alongside them. And we still have a sense of authority in their lives, but we're trying to coach them through issues so that they learn to own it for themselves rather than just demanding certain behaviors from them. Because when parents don't make that transition, often there's a lot of rebellion and relational fractures that happen because it becomes a battle for control. And when that becomes the battle, what loses is the relationship. What loses is trust and connection. That's what we have to keep coming back to fight for. Okay, one last thing I'll share with you for this first part, because maybe we'll come back in the future. We'll add some more if this proves helpful. But emphasize the best about who you believe they are. Many times when things get tense, we as parents can find ourselves saying things that just come out in anger. Things we may not really even mean, but we say it. We make accusations, we call them names. You're so lazy. You don't care about anyone but yourself. And here's the thing. Once that comes out of our mouth, we can't take it back. Even if you apologize later, because many of us assume that when someone says something in anger, it's what they actually believe. And many of us know that firsthand because you still have things that your parents said to you echoing in your head. And that sucks, but it's just a reality. And so when approaching any conflict with our kids, one of the things we've found helpful through the years is to try to discipline ourselves when we're confronting our kids about an issue, is to lead with asking genuine questions, trying to figure out what's going on inside of them, listening to their answers, and then giving them some safe space to talk about it. And then, when it's our turn to talk, to start with emphasizing the best about who we believe they are. So it sounds like, Jordan, can you help me understand what's going on with you? Because that behavior, that thing you did, that's not you. That's not who you are. I know you. You're kind, you're loving, you make other people better. That's who you are. So something must be going on inside of you that caused you to forget that for a minute. Because this thing, that's not you. So what's going on? You see, when we do that, what we do as parents is we reinforce what we actually believe is most true about them. Because in the long run, that's what we want to keep echoing in their heads. That's what we want to shape them. So, there you go. There's a few handles I hope are helpful as you navigate conflict in your home. Keep having grace on yourself and grace on your kids, because again, none of us have a manual, but we're just all trying to do the best that we can. You're loved. Take care.